Right, okay, well look, greetings, welcome to the Philosophy Club here in the middle of France, in La Creuse. It's right in the geographical heartland of France, beautiful sleepy part of France, but we've got very exciting news that the Tour de France is coming close to us at Évaux-les-Bains in July. And they are serious cyclists, these Tour de France people, but they're not coming through this village. So I'm going to start by just sharing a few things that I've been up to this week, what's going on in the world, what's my take philosophically on what's happening. We've got the Olympic Games coming up in July, and I'll be organising a kind of cultural event in August to go parallel with that for the Delphic Games. And so, very important developments in the world. There's been, I think, there's a sort of global search for peace, I think. And I've just been participating in a 24-hour peace wave, which is a online, going for 24 hours, different groups all around the world, circling the planet, have been doing prayers, doing exhibitions, events for peace. And I've only just, it literally has just finished a few hours ago. I wasn't able to hear it live, but it's all on YouTube. It was organised by a friend and colleague of mine called David Swanson, who runs the World Without War organisation in New England, and he's done it with the International Peace Bureau, which is the main network of peace organisations. My Philosophers for Peace has been a member of that. And it was the International Peace Bureau that sent me to India in 2017 to go and meet a Hindu peace activist, Swami Chaturvedi. And out of that came the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum, which I'm chairing now. And my mother was very active with the International Peace Bureau because she was a peace activist back in the 70s, 80s. And she went to some of their conferences. Anyway, it's very moving, this, and I think, do watch it. I posted it on my Facebook, and it's all on YouTube. I just tuned into some young people from Toronto. They're camping out on the lawn of Toronto University in protest against the bombings in Gaza and the genocide that's going on. And very moving. There was a Jewish group called Jews Against Genocide involved, Canadian Jews. And it's really nice to see young Canadian Jews saying, no, not in our name, we're Jews. We follow various forms of Judaism, but there's nothing in our holy books that say genocide is acceptable. So they're campaigning for peace. And then there was another interesting presentation by a Russian woman who's a mountain climber called Albugacheva. I'd never heard of her before. And she has made a vow to plant peace flags on all the peaks of the world over 8,000 feet. She's taken them up to Everest. She's already planted them on several, including the biggest mountains in the Caucasus, Mount Elbrus. And she's an amazing Russian kind of mountain climber peace activist who's saying enough war, we have to have universal peace is her call. She just gave a talk at this World Peace Wave. Took 15 minutes. I mean, impressive stuff. And then there was a Ukrainian peace activist and from all around the world. And also, I mean, I was quite pleased I plugged into the Canadian section because being a dual Canadian citizen, it's really great to see they're very active on this issue and working with the native people as well. So that's what's been going on the planet, and it was time for solstice. I've got a new word, a new spelling. Solstice should be spelled S-O-U-L-S-T-I-C-E. It's a solstice is when we stop and pause and think about our soul. Is what we're doing on the planet good for our soul or not, and for each other's? Because if Jung is right and there's a collective unconscious, then we're all part of each other's soul. And if I harm you or hurt you or traumatize you with violence, I'm doing myself injuries. I've also been studying Esperanto this week, the work of Rabbi Hillel, who in his devotee and student Zamenhof, a great Polish Jewish intellectual, he lived in the 19th century in Poland when people were getting into Zionism, and they said, join us, become a Zionist. We all want to go back to Israel and plant the national flag. And he looked at the idea and he said, no, I don't actually agree with that. It's retrograde. We should be like universalists. So he invented Esperanto, which was an easy language to learn based on Latin and Italian, Spanish and French. If you speak Romance languages, it's easy. And simplified grammar, much easier than Italian, say. And he was a real visionary. He was awarded the Légion d'honneur from the French because we admired his work. And what an amazing guy. And I discovered something doing the research. There was a tiny little bit of land in the shape of a diamond between Germany, France, Holland and Belgium, called like the middle of nowhere. And for 20 years between the wars, it was a little country in its own right. It had like 2 villages. I've written down somewhere the name of it. I'd never heard it before. And they adopted Esperanto as their second language because they were all among French speakers, Dutch, German and so on. So they said, well, we'll speak Esperanto. Of course, the Nazis hated them. They accused them of being Jewish conspiracy and killed as many as they could get hold of. And the Soviets hated them as well and persecuted them. So they got clobbered from both sides. But they're still going. There's about 100,000 Esperantists around the world. So, my pledge is to learn a bit of Esperanto. So if you hear me breaking into Esperanto, that's why. I've also done my voting because I believe in my civic duty. I live in a democracy which depends on people voting, and so I've filled in my ballot paper and posted it. And the British election is really quite important. I look very carefully at the candidates in Scotland, which is where I vote, and I have a system of making ethical choices. I do it mathematically. It's called the ethical calculus. I published a book on it. So when you've got a complex decision to make, you put it in columns A, B, C. I have 3 parties I could have voted for, really. And I put all the positive reasons to vote for parties A, B and C, and also the negative ones why not to. I award them marks for each point, like 10 out of 10, so give them all 10, and a couple of points were worth 100. You can, if they're really important, you can give them extra. And then you add up the sums, and whichever column wins, that's the one you do. This system I've used since I invented it, and I used to teach it, and it works. I've made really important life decisions, like should I go and live in France, using this system, and you can think through all the possible pros and cons of each choice. Anyway, so I did that, and it came out clearly, vote for this party, 430 votes. Number 2 got 140, and the other one got about 10, so... so I think everyone should vote in Britain. And I think I don't care what you vote for as long as it's not for the Tory party. If it's for the Tory party, you shouldn't be listening to my talks. Although, no, you might be a late developer, in which case, welcome. There have been good Tories in the past. Walter Scott, Edmund Burke, a few of them were quite intellectual. But the current lot are not. They are not conservatives. They don't want to conserve anything. They're destroying stuff. I call them the destructivist party. Or we should rename the conservatives, C-O-N-N, the conservatives, because Boris Johnson invented, rescheduled them as a party of liars out for their own self-advancement. So, anyway, I didn't vote for them. What else have I been up to? Well, I also attended this monthly event of the Wisdom Keepers Council, which I belong to, run from Canada, and there's a few dozen of us meet up, various times, but normally once a month, and we were discussing, basically we're trying to look at the world situation from a wisdom perspective. People that are on this are men and women who are counsellors, therapists, spiritual elders, sages, shamans, etc., from different cultures around the place. It's a really interesting group, and I've got to know them pretty well. We're about to publish a book of collected work because we've been doing this work for 2 years. And we were discussing the stages of life, kind of midlife crises that people go through. And I was arguing, I think the planet's going through a kind of midlife crisis where we're having a re-questioning of what we stand for as a planet, a reboot. And a midlife crisis can be quite a positive thing. You review your life, then you change course, and you move on in a new direction. It occurred to me when we were having our meeting that some of the leaders on our planet at the moment haven't even reached the midlife crisis. They're stuck in adolescent tantrums. Some of our leaders are wedded to violence, like Putin and Netanyahu and the Hamas leaders who launched their attacks. These people are like adolescent kids, I think. Adolescents get really, really angry and want to smash stuff if they don't get their way immediately. I used to teach adolescent people like that in schools, and some of them used to try and burn the schools down. They were so angry with the system. And that seems to me what we've got. We've got destructive adolescent rages going on. And they need helping through that. Anger is not helpful, especially when you've got vast weapons at your disposal. So really what we're trying to do with the Wisdom Council is try and run courses to counsel ministers and government officials. They need somewhere to go to work out their anger and hatreds and racisms and all that stuff.
You are kind of Jesuit?
Well, there are. You could say it's a latter-day version of the Jesuits. It's a multi-faith thing. The founder is Satyen Raja, who's a Hindu Canadian universalist who studied Zen enlightenment for years, and he's a martial arts specialist. So it's kind of Zen Jesuit. But yeah, we're trying to do what the Jesuits tried to do, which is counsel, people to make wise choices. So that was fun. And then the last thing I'll share is I also took part in this thing I do every month of experts in restorative justice. This is a kind of system used with, again, often in schools, with kids that are angry, doing bullying. And what you do is you get them in a circle doing restorative work, so you're restoring the communication flow. And it's amazing, the results. And we were discussing Gaza and Israel. How can we apply restorative justice techniques to that situation? It was a very interesting discussion. And of course it's been the solstice this week since our last meeting, and I was taking part in various solstice type things. We had a little wedding here in the village, which was fun, and a little party, and so the solstice is always a good time here. In the old Druid traditions, it was always a 3-day event, and so my Druid friends were at Stonehenge and Avebury and other sacred sites, and also here in France. And I think it is a solstice, it's a time to reflect on the soul and give thanks, really, for the fact that we're still here and that we have a life and that we can be of service still. Okay, that's all I'll say for now. Anything else people want to add, or questions or observations?
Oh, yeah, I have a little one.
Okay, go for it.
It's about the analysis you are making before voting. And I've heard that we could use that system collectively. That means that's not because when you have a rank, or for example 300 for the first and 130 for the second,
yes,
and 10 for the third.
Yeah.
If we have no choice to put only one name, the result will be different. Maybe that if we count all citizens' rankings.
And they have plural choices.
Yes.
Yeah, be a more sophisticated form of democratic voting. I think some of these proportional representation systems have that. built into them. I don't quite know how they all work. I'm not an expert in electoral systems, but I do know friends that are. I was involved with the Conflict Research Society for a while, and they've come up with systems of electoral voting that there's something called the Dahon system that they use in Northern Ireland. Very sort of fractured communities. There's a very sophisticated system they use, named after a Dutch guy. But yes, and also with online voting, we could all be registering, what do we think of Macron's new proposal to scrap pensions or whatever. We could all vote and say, and it could be done. I would like to see that more often. Instead of just you all get to vote like every 4 or 5 years, we should have more citizens' input into policies, I think. But for that, we need a kind of political pause, because at the moment, politics has become so polarised that even to suggest something like that, half would say, oh, it's terrible, half would say it's great, and then it would become a new football match.
I'm not so sure it's polarized. It's presented as polarized, but for example, at the moment in France, it's difficult to guess which side will win. But many people want a kind of both sides working together in a way.
Yes, like a coalition or something.
And maybe only extreme ideas are used to polarize the stuff, but the extreme ideas, in fact, only maybe 15% of the voters are interested in this extremes idea. So that's a...
Yes, well, social media plays a big role in weaponizing the extremes. But I think those are good ideas. And in France here, it's even difficult to know what the sides are. When you say which side you're on, there are sort of different, it's more like tribes. There's the Mélenchon tribe, the Macron tribe, the hard right tribe, the Green tribe, the socialist tribe, and so on. I don't think tribalism is the way to solve problems. I think, and that's why I like the Druids, because they had carte blanche among all the tribes. In ancient Gaul, there were about 30 or 40 different tribes. The Senonanes, the Parisi, the Lemovices from around Limoges, and it's their towns that have formed the main backbone of France's civilization. Caesar called them the Oppida, which was the Latin for these towns. So he went round and conquered them all. But he didn't destroy them, and Bourges, for instance, was a Druid stronghold. So each of these tribal areas had its own little identity and so on, but the Druids were international. They could travel anywhere throughout the entire Celtic world and be honoured and recognised and welcomed. And that, I think, is what we need now. That, to me, is why I'm interested in the role of intellectuals or philosophers. We should be going beyond the tribes and saying to them all, let's cooperate for the common good, where the planet's burning. And we can't afford these wars, which are increasing and pumping out new toxins and so on. So anyway, thank you for that. That's very exciting.
So you're saying that we should all be able to vote in other countries?
No. I think as a British citizen, I get to vote only in the British elections. I can't vote in France.
Yeah, but that's what you're suggesting, that this possibility will probably bring bigger improvement or changes, evolution.
Well, since I've been living here for 7 years, and I'll probably be here for the next 20, I think it might be nice if the French awarded me honorary citizenship at the end of it and gave me a vote. I would accept that. But no, I think it was more addressing the choices one makes, how we vote, and can we have a plural? Because, for instance, when I get given a choice of 2 or 3 things, I'm usually torn. Some of me wants to do this, some of me wants to do that, and some of me wants to do that. And, how do I decide? And that's why I invented my particular ethical choice decision, the ethical calculus.
I have a comment on this.
Okay.
I heard exactly the same issue on a video this morning, and the guy was saying, "Oh, okay, I used to take this method. It was a reason method guided by reason."
Yes.
And he also used a method guided by intuition.
Right.
For example, if you have three proposals,
Yes.
and for example, as a maybe 2 or 3 years project,
Right.
okay, mentally you draw a line. Okay, I draw a line from the chair to the periodic table.
Okay.
And I will visualize it is the 2 or 3 years project.
Okay.
Okay. And then I take the first option. I have 3 options, I take the first one.
Okay.
I let the body the quiet test as possible.
Okay.
And I
Start walking.
start walking. And I have a feeling about this option.
Okay. So you think with the body.
Yes. And then, not at the same place, you make another line with the second option.
Okay.
And then a third line with the third option.
Okay.
And the guy was saying, it's crazy
It
because
works.
your body tells you.
Okay. That's interesting. That. Yeah. I like that. I'll try that. Yeah. I mean, it could be combined with my more.
Yeah, it's a combination, yes.
My more scientific method, but no, thank you for that. Okay. Right. So let's move on. Let's do a look at the look at the tarot of the gods, I think, to start with, because we love the gods, and because talking about intuition, we want to see what serendipity throws at us.
2 books.
So we'll. What do the gods think about, the solstice and this time of year? What insights can they share with us? So if you want to shuffle them up, and then just choose one that will be of particular interest. Yes. No. Okay, that's your one. Okay. If you want to pass the pack to Armel now, that'd be great. We'll see what he gets. Oh, very quick. Right. Okay, so let's have a look at these. That's interesting. Well, you both drawn fire cards. Hephaestus, you've got. Hephaestus, who is the 3 of fire, and he's the famous god because he was the Greek equivalent to Vulcan, and so he is counted really as Vulcan as well in the same card, Hephaestus, and he was very skillful. So what page? 447. Yes. So the text that goes with these cards is the most detailed ever written on the tarot. Most little tarot books are like a small little volume. I totally went over the top and spent 2 years writing this and really enjoyed it because I love the gods. And my problem is I can't choose between them. I love them all. So you've got cards for all my favourites. I love Hephaestus. He's amazing. He's based originally in Crete. The story of him is quite interesting. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, who had a stormy relationship, let's put it like that. And when he was born disabled. he was lame. He couldn't walk. There was something wrong with him, and his mother threw him down from Mount Olympus. Shocking, but true, because she didn't like his impairment. And then, however, he was then rescued and saved by the intervention of Zeus and other gods, who then had him brought up secretly, so Hera wouldn't find out. It's an interesting story, and he was taught by in Crete by these sort of mystical dwarfs, we'd call them, who were capable of making anything out of anything. Kind of people with workshops where you can just go and say, I need a new whatever, and they can knock it together in a few days, So they taught him all these skills. And yes, so, and what happened was, the gods were desperate for him to come back and help on Mount Olympus, because they needed him to make stuff, right? But he said, no, I'm not coming because my mother threw me out of Olympus. And so they actually had to plead for him to come back. And not only that, they tempted him back by saying, you can even have Aphrodite as your partner. So the most beautiful of all the goddesses was what tempted, right? So that's interesting, I think. And it's a sort of, it was a union that didn't always work out, because Aphrodite went off and had an affair with the god of war, Ares. She found her lame husband, useful for making stuff, but not, the most brilliantly attractive guy. And so she went off and was seduced by war. I think there might be something psychologically in this about the current time. Humankind is a bit seduced by the warrior, the violent, the hero. I once was at a conference in Turkey with peace activists, and this is not that long ago, 8 years ago or something, and wonderful people from all over the planet. And I saw one woman who was holding up a photograph on her mobile phone of a Palestinian fighter with all the gear and the gun, and she was saying, drooling over him, saying, I love him, he's such a hero, he's standing up for my people. And she really hero worshipped this guy, who was probably a Hamas guy. And I tried to say to her, is that wise? Aren't we supposed to be doing peace stuff here? No, we need heroes, we have to fight back. And I just think, and I'm sure that the Jewish women are doing the same with their IDF heroes, who they idolise, the great heroes that are going and killing people. And so I think there's a problem here that it's been inbred into us as humanity for centuries. And our poems and our novels, they're all about the hero who goes out and wins, conquers. We need to rethink that, maybe. And it's interesting that if you know the story, Hephaestus made a net that was unbreakable, and he threw it over the lovers, Aphrodite and Ares, as they were making love, and he caught them in the net to prove it, and all the other gods came and looked and laughed. And so he got his revenge. So I think, anyway, if you look into the story of Hephaestus, there are many parallels to other mythological systems. The Egyptian craftsman god Ptah was sometimes seen as a dwarf god. We've had him before. And in other systems, in the Ugarit tradition, which was on the coasts of Ras Shamra, where Syria is now, Semitic people, they had a craftsman god called Kotharwakasis, who also had a limp. It's interesting, these very creative people often have a sort of limp.
What is limp?
They can't walk properly.
Ah.
They have a bad leg. Yeah. So the Roman equivalent, Vulcan, is also important. And in the book there's a lot of information about Vulcan as well, who's the equivalent. And so when the Greeks and Romans first met and heard about each other, they kind of married up each other's gods. And they said, well, Hephaestus, he's obviously our Vulcan. And yes, I can tell a funny story because that's the origin of the word volcano, right? It's a little synchronicity. So my car was playing up badly, and I had to take it to Montluçon, to the garage. They were going to check it out. And so I set off driving, praying that I'd get to Montluçon. And of course, halfway there, the car started stalling and it stopped. It just like, you know. So I'm there on the road to Montluçon praying. I couldn't even open the bonnet because I didn't have the right tools. And I was having a meltdown on the roadside. One guy passed and stopped really kindly. And we figured out how to open at least the bonnet, which was, by the way, steaming. The water had exploded. There was no water, you know. It was like everything was going wrong at once. Anyway, he saved me because he just was a very kind, polite French guy who just took pity on me. And so I was able to put water in from a water bottle, calm it down, wait 10 minutes. It sort of started, and I was limping because what it was doing was its firing was all off. It was misfiring. There was a technical flaw, and it was showing all these signs on the dashboard. Take it to the garage immediately, you know, and that's where it was going. Anyway, I didn't know I was going to get there because it had lost all power. It wasn't, and we were going up a slight incline, and I was praying and praying. Finally, we limped to the top of the hill, and I saw the volcanoes of Clermont-Ferrand, Puy-de-Dôme. And I thought at that moment, I thought, oh, Vulcan, he saved me. Because I saw the volcanoes at the moment when the hill crests, and now you can go downhill all the way to Montluçon. There's a particular moment on that road, it's a back road into Montluçon, where you come up to the crest, you see the volcanoes, and then it's downhill all the way. So I knew I could coast down and get to the garage, which I did. And it was just a synchronicity. Here I was going to Hephaestus's workshop to get the car fixed, you know, and I see the volcanoes, and then I know I'm home and dry. So we all need our Hephaestus in our lives, and I think that in the Gaelic Celtic world, Govan was the smith of the gods. He was really respected, Govannon in Welsh. He was the Welsh Druid equivalent. And smiths were very important in early societies because they did the horseshoes, they made the tools. You know, mastery of metal was really quite important for humanity. We should always honour them. And there's a part of Glasgow called Govan, named after him, which is where they make the ships on the Clyde estuary. I've always found that interesting, that the Glaswegians, I don't know if it's a synchronicity or what, but dedicated to Govan, the smith of the gods, is where the Glaswegian shipping industry came from, and it's still going. So, yes, so I think what the card means is there may be pain ahead, but, you know, if we invoke the wisdom of the divine, we can get through it. And if we draw on our own skill internally, as a planet at this time, we can get through it. And I think that the work of the